Hello everybody, my name is GKO and I'm here to bring you another 10 things I learned from last week's video. Um, Once again, some of these things I might have already known, but like I said, I never really touched back in on them, so I learned more about the topic at the end. And some of the words and names I might mispronounce because they're kind of just out there and I may have never heard them before. But anyway, I'm going to start with a couple easy ones. And the first thing that I learned from last week is a layman or layman's terms. Now, I've rarely heard this, and when I heard it, I was like, well, what the hell is that? So I looked it up, and accordingly, a layman is someone who is not skilled at a profession, and layman's terms are words that someone who is not an expert can only understand. Now, when I first heard that, the layman's terms part, that confused the hell out of me. But I had to read it a couple times until I actually knew, what it was telling me. And the second thing that I learned is there is a river or an ancient river called Pishon that is noted to be in the book of Genesis, and it cannot be found. And it is one of the 4 rivers that have been noted to be around the Garden of Eden. The third thing that I learned is an effect called the McGurk effect, and this is where your eyes can trick your ears. Now, it sounds wacky at first, but it's been proven to actually happen. There was a test done on All Times 10 channel, and I'll put all my links in the description, where a person would say "ba" in the first test, and then in the second test he would still say "ba," but his lips would make him look like he was saying "fa," but he really wasn't. So I know listening to me say that is kind of like, what the hell is he talking about? But like I said, if you want to see the test, I will put the link in the description of the video. Something else that I learned, well, that I kind of already knew, is that there is a quote-unquote legendary city that is said to be located in the Earth's core called Agartha. And I first heard this term actually in Black Ops Zombies, because Samantha would always talk about Agartha, which is kind of weird that I learned that from Zombies, I know. And it is related to the belief in a hollow earth and is popular subject in esotericism. And I don't know what the hell I was trying to say there, but a noted conspiracy theory, I guess you would call it, to be connected to this Agartha or hollow earth is the connection of lizard-like alien people, or another, I guess, cult, tribe, whatever, of lizard people is called the Vrilya. Now, the Vrilya I've also learned from Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies, and there was a weapon on Call of the Dead where it would turn zombies into humans, and I don't remember what the name of it is right now, but it was kind of an Easter egg. And basically, the Vrilya would be like lizard shape-shifting people who are quote-unquote noted to be some of the world's popular leaders, like presidents, prime ministers, priests, and so on, that apparently live in the Earth's core and, like I said, rule the world. So I know it's kind of a crazy conspiracy, but I mean, hey, it is a conspiracy. And now I'm going to start kind of getting into harder, touchier topics a little bit. So I recently learned from Psych Substance channel that there is a drug called Iboga, and it is a psychedelic drug found from the root bark of a West African shrub. It was used for thousands of years for spiritual enlightenment and development, and as a rite of passage into adulthood. It has been known that Iboga has stopped the addiction of opiates after one experience, although this wasn't known to the 60s, which isn't surprising. And one thing that I saw in Adam's channel was that it's one of the weirder psychedelic drugs. And all drugs aside, Some other things I learned about space is that Jupiter has a massive hurricane on it known as the Great Red Spot that is supposedly 3 times larger than the Earth, and winds can reach up to 425 miles per hour. I also learned what a rogue planet was. A rogue planet is a random planet just hanging out in the Milky Way galaxy. There could possibly be millions of these in the Milky Way, and some of them you can't even see unless you use infrared lighting. So like, if you ever seen Star Wars Attack of the Clones, where Obi-Wan goes to Camino and he goes to the star charts and he looks for Camino and he can't find it, it's kind of like that unless you use infrared lighting in the Milky Way and you see the rogue planet. Now, something else that I learned that's related to space is that outside of the Milky Way, the nearest galaxy is Andromeda, which I already knew that. And beyond Andromeda are tons of other galaxies. But the thing is, out of all of these galaxies, they are all in one cluster. And this cluster is known as the Virgo supercluster. And the thing is, there are a bunch of superclusters out there in the universe. And outside of these superclusters, this is kind of where the multiverse theory comes in. But outside of all these superclusters is believed to be little bubbles in an ocean full of just other universes, which, to be honest, they could exist, honestly. Now, to start talking about some pussy. No, I'm just kidding. But since I did include some facts about semen in my last 10 things I learned from last week, I decided to throw in some things about, the other counterpart, which is the vagina. So the vagina is acidic, just like tomatoes, and is known to have a pH level of 4.5. And woman's ejaculate is known to be components of a milky white substance produced by basically the female prostate, which is nicknamed, and it would be the Skene's gland. It has been proven that a protein called prostate-specific antigen that allows sperm to swim is present in the Skene's gland, and it's what contributes to the milky white substance. Now, if a woman squirts, it is reported to be that it's female's urine from the bladder diluted with other substances from the urethra or in their urethra. Wow, that was like a fucking tongue twister, if you get what I mean. Okay, so going back into some other biochemistry bullshit, and this honestly is where I might not even know what the fuck I'm talking about, but there is a biochemical process. There's actually a couple of them the first one's called anabolism, and it's something that I should have learned in fucking biology, but I never did. And it's the synthesis of complex molecules in living organisms from simpler ones together with the storage of energy, causing constructive metabolism. There's also catabolism, which is the breakdown of complex molecules in living organisms to form simpler ones, together with the release of energy, or ATP, which is destructive metabolism. And I don't know if catabolism involves this, but I know anabolism does, because I learned this from working out. But anabolism, I guess, and maybe catabolism, they help relieve or get rid of or oxidize lactic acid, which is it's something that is produced in the muscles, and it's what, like, when you're exercising and working out, it's what causes that fatigue feeling in your muscles and that tired feeling. Okay, and now, all molecular bullshit put aside, there is actually something called the Four Bardos, and it's a Tibetan term in Buddhism for what happens after you die. And like I said, there's 4 bardos, and the first bardo comes at the very moment of death, when there dawns the clear light of the ultimate reality. This is the very content and substance of the state of liberation. If only the soul can recognize it and act in a way to remain in that state, the instructions intended to be read at the moment of the person's death are designed to help him do this. He is told, first of all, to embrace this supreme experience not in a selfish and egoistic way, but rather with love and compassion for all sentient beings. This will aid him in the second step, which is to realize that his own mind and self is identical with the clear light, implying that he himself is the ultimate reality, quote unquote, the all-good Buddha, transcending time, eternity, and all creation. If he can recognize this while in the supreme state at the moment of death, he will attain liberation, that is. He will remain in the clear light forever. This condition is called the Dharmakaya, which is the highest spiritual body of the Buddha. Most souls, however, will fail to do this. They will be pulled down by the weight of their karma into the second stage of the first bardo, called the secondary clear light, seen immediately after death. At this point, there are separate instructions to be read according to the spiritual condition of the person while in life. For an individual advanced in meditation and other spiritual practices, there is repeated over and over the same instructions as at the same moment of death, enjoining him to recognize himself as the Dharmakaya. For a person who was still at a student level on the spiritual path, there is the injunction for him to meditate on his tutelary deity, that is, the particular God for whom he performed devotional practices while alive. Finally, if the deceased be of the common folk, unpracticed in any spiritual disciplines, the instruction is to meditate upon the great compassionate Lord, which is to say an avatar, worshipped by the multitude equivalent to Jesus as conceived by the average Christian. The second bardo. If the soul is still not liberated at this stage, it will descend into the second bardo, which is said to last for 2 weeks. The second bardo is also divided into 2 parts. In the first, the soul of the deceased encounters what are referred to as the peaceful deities. On each of the 7 days, a particular Buddha being will appear in their radiance and glory, with a bevy of angelic attendants. At the same time, on each day in turn, there will shine a light from one of the 6 worlds of the Buddhist universe called lokas. On the first day of the second bardo, there appears to be the soul of the divine Father-Mother, that is, the supreme deity of the universe, transcending all dualities, including the division into sexes. The next step in the destiny of the soul is determined by his reaction to this God. If his life on earth was well lived, he will now be in a state of purity and grace, and he will enter into the joy of the God and attain liberation. If, on the other hand, he has lived an ignoble and impious life, the effects of his bad karma will cause the intense radiant presence of the God to strike fear and terror into his heart, and he will be drawn instead to the softer light of the Devaloka, or Devaloka, which has dawned along with his deity. This is still a fairly attractive fate, for the Devas, or Devas, I don't know how to pronounce that, are the gods, quote unquote, or angels, and their loka is equivalent to the Christian heaven. However, the Buddhist teaching is that even heaven is not the highest spiritual objective, because it is still only a temporary state in the manifest universe. Liberation is believed to be the only final and permanent resting place for the soul, an unmanifest state beyond all existence. Damn, I fucked up a perfect ending. On the second day, there appears the second highest God in the Buddhist pantheon. In fact, he is actually the second person in the literal Buddhist Holy Trinity. At the same time, there dawns a smoky light from hell, and here we note that just as the Buddhist heaven is not permanent, eternal state, neither is its hell. Even the most wretched souls will eventually work their way out of even the deepest pit of hell. Just as seen, the highest and purest souls will eventually lose their footing in heaven and descend again into the cycle of death and rebirth. Liberation is the only way out. Once again, if the soul responds to the dazzling white light of the second God with the joy of a pure heart, he will be liberated thereby. But if he specifically reacts with anger from having indulged in this vice on earth, he will recoil from the light in fear and will be drawn into hell. The pattern is repeated on the third day. This time it is the fault, if egotism, that will cause the soul to react to the God with fear, and he will be drawn to the human world, where his next incarnation will thereby take place. On the fourth day dawns the God of eternal life. If the soul has a negative reaction to him because of miserliness and attachment, he will be drawn toward rebirth in the Predaloka, a world of hungry ghosts who have huge stomachs and throats of the size of pinholes, and so they wander about it in a constant state of unsatisfied, ravenous desire. On the fifth day comes God in the form of an almighty conqueror. This time is jealousy that will unseat the soul, and he will be born into the ShareAlike, a world of fierce warrior deities or demons. On the sixth day, all the deities return and dawn together, along with the lights from all 6 lokas. On the seventh day, there appear the knowledge-holding deities, who are more fierce and demonic-looking than those that have previously dawned, and in fact they are sort of a transitional element to the next stage of the second bardo, where the souls encounter the wrathful deities. Encounters the wrathful deities. Meanwhile, if because of stupidity the soul cannot face the knowledge-holding deities, he is drawn towards the brute loka, that is, he will be reborn on earth as an animal. As I look straight at my dogs. In the second week of the second bardo, the soul meets 7 legions of wrathful deities, hideous, terrifying demons who advance upon him with flame and sword, drinking blood from human skulls, threatening to wreak unmerciful torture upon him. To maim, disembowel, decapitate, and slay him, the natural tendency, of course, is for the soul to attempt to flee from these beings in stark, screaming, blood-curdled terror. But if he does, all is lost. The instructions at this stage of the bardo are for the soul to have no fear, but rather to recognize that the wrathful deities are really the peaceful deities in disguise. Their dark side manifesting as a result of his own evil karma, the soul is told to calmly face each demon in turn and visualize it as a deity that it truly is, or else as his own tutelary deity. If he can do this, he will merge with the being and attain the second degree of liberation, that lesser aspect of it which is now the best he can hope for here in the second bardo. Furthermore, he is told to awaken to the fact that all these fearsome creatures are not real, but are merely illusions emanating from his own mind. If he can recognize this, they will vanish and he will be liberated. If he cannot, he eventually wanders to the third bardo. In the third bardo, the soul encounters the Lord of Death, aka the Reaper from Overwatch. Just kidding. The Lord of Death is a fearsome demonic deity who appears in smoke and fire and subjects the soul to a judgment. If the dead person protests that he has done no evil, the Lord of Death holds up before him the mirror of karma, wherein every good and evil act is vividly reflected. Now demons approach and begin to inflict torments and punishments upon the soul for his evil deeds. The instructions in the Bardo Tadol are for him to attempt to recognize the voidness of all these beings, including the Lord of Death himself, Reaper from Overwatch. Just kidding. The dead person is told that this entire scene unfolding around him is a projection from his own mind. Even here, he can attain liberation by recognizing this. The soul who is still not liberated after the judgment will now be drawn remorselessly towards rebirth. The lights of the 6 lokas will dawn again. Into one of these worlds the soul must be born, and the light of the one he is destined for will shine more brightly than the others. The soul is still experiencing the frightening apparitions and sufferings of the third bardo, and he feels that he will do anything to escape from this condition. He will seek shelter in what appears to be caves or hiding places, but which are actually the entrances to wombs. He is warned of this by the text of the Bardo Tadol and urged not to enter them, but to meditate upon the clear light instead, for it is still possible for him to achieve the third degree of liberation and avoid rebirth. Finally, there comes a point where it is no longer possible to attain this liberation. And after this, the soul is given instruction on how to choose the best womb for a favorable incarnation. The basic method is non-attachment to try to rise above both attraction to worldly pleasures and repulsion from worldly ills. The final words of the Bardo Todol are, quote unquote, let virtue and goodness be perfected in every way. Be not fond of the dull smoke-colored light from hell. And that's quoted from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Now, I know the last one was long as hell, but I thought the 4 Bardos were actually pretty fucking interesting. And sorry for the long video period, but I hope you guys are having a great day. I hope you guys stay having a great day. And